All right, good evening, Northside. Wednesday. What would Winnie the Pooh have said about today? What would Winnie the Pooh have said about today? It's a very blustery day. Hey, I have some Winnie the Pooh fans, so he's been my hero for years. I even have the original, not the original book, but the old Winnie the Pooh thick book before cartoons and things came out. It's hard to read. It's written in English. So, all right, we're in our last session of good lessons from bad guys. You have a whole new lesson next time. Looking forward to that. So if you want to follow along tonight, you'll be turning to Numbers chapter 16. It's a long chapter. I'll be reading some of it, talking about some of it. But anyway, you hear that rumbling? I've been hearing it all day. Couldn't figure out what it was. It's helicopters, Marine helicopters flying around. They finally figured that out. So that was weird. That was one of those puzzling things that bothered me all day long. All right, let's meet the characters of tonight's lesson. We have Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. We're going to entitle this "The Rebellious." So good lessons from bad guys. We're going to learn some lessons from these three rebellious people. There was actually four, but one of them doesn't get mentioned again, so we don't know what happened to him. Korah was a first cousin to Moses and Aaron. Korah, Moses, and Aaron were all Levites. And so now Moses did not grow up with the brother and the cousins and all that, because if you remember, Moses was swept out of the river by Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the palace or whatever. So he did not grow up with these guys. But Aaron and Korah probably kind of grew up together, probably knew each other, played on the playground together and everything. But Korah is the great grandson of Levi, the third son of Jacob. So he, of course, is one of the people who were in charge of ministry. If you remember, the tribe of Levi was given specific roles of ministry and priesthood and spiritual service to the children of Israel. They were not going to get land in the promised land, and they were not going to have to go out and work to make a living. They were going to be supported by the other tribes for their service. And so that's kind of who these guys were. Dathan and Abiram were brothers, but they were not Levites. They were descendants of Reuben. So they were of the tribe of Reuben. They were partners with Korah in a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. They rebelled against Moses because of his leadership, and Aaron because he was the high priest. We'll talk a little bit more about why that was in just a bit. But even though the word isn't used in Numbers 16, it's obvious that together these three considered Moses and Aaron to be tyrants. In other words, abusers of power over other folks. I don't know where these guys were when this whole thing started and God gave Moses the leadership to take the children of Israel out of Egypt and appointed Aaron as the high priest. But if we go back and forward and through Numbers and through Exodus, we see all kinds of rebellion going on among the children of Israel. It's not unusual. In fact, I think in Sundays we're going to start studying Exodus. Is that right? Somebody shake it out. Exodus. So we're going to get into some of that by studying Exodus, which is really going to be interesting. So please come, make sure you're there on Sunday mornings in your classroom. That's a great book. That's just a great book. So anyway, they're going to rebel against Moses and Aaron. And it's not going to be a pretty picture. It usually isn't. What we kind of have, the scenario that we kind of have is rebellion of some kind takes place, or discontent, or whatever takes place. And God gets angry with the children of Israel, and Moses intervenes. And Moses, he is God's chosen guy to lead them out. And so God listens to Moses. We don't use that term a lot, but God does listen to Moses many times and backs away for a little bit anyway from some of his punishments of the children of Israel. We're going to see some of that again tonight. There's another guy, the fourth person of this trio is a guy named On, O-N. And of course I looked it up on my little app, which is biblical word pronunciations. And I discovered that it's pronounced On. Big deal, right? I thought surely this little two-letter word has to have some real weird pronunciation, but it doesn't. It's just On. So the Jewish Women's Encyclopedia says that he was a chief. There apparently are several, maybe divided up among the number of people. There were a lot of people in the Exodus. Okay. A lot of people in the Exodus. Wasn't just a few hundred. So he was a chief of the tribe of Reuben, but he's never mentioned again. We're not going to see him the rest of chapter 16, and you're not going to thumb through the Bible and find On anywhere. Again, the Jewish Women's Encyclopedia, which I look at a lot of the Jewish encyclopedia type stuff. It's pretty cool. But the Women's Encyclopedia says that his wife talked him out of the rebellion against Moses and Aaron, and he had to stay home, and which wasn't a bad thing. I told Myrna tonight that we were not going to talk about women, so just that one time, okay, just that one time we're going to talk about women. But she might have saved On's life. So thank you, Mrs. On, whoever you might be. But these four, they're not even the only ones. There's the 250 that these guys and we're going to call Korah the leader. It's often referred to as Korah's rebellion anyway. So we're going to call Korah the leader. But Korah and these other guys recruited 250 guys to go along with them. And they were from all the different tribes, and they were leaders and all this kind of stuff to go along with them in this rebellion. So that was bad news for the 250 folks. The other two characters in this story, we've already mentioned, of course, Moses and Aaron. They were God's appointed leaders. They were the two main leaders of bringing the children out of Egyptian captivity and toward the promised land. Now, this was a long journey. It was a long journey because the people of Israel kept rebelling, all right? But Moses was in charge of the leadership and of making the decisions and things, and Aaron was right there with him, and he was in charge. He was the high priest. He was in charge of taking care of those things. So, and by the way, they're brothers, as you may know. Moses and Aaron were brothers. So there you go. All right. Now, what's the difference between perhaps what Korah and his bunch believed about Moses and Aaron, that they were tyrants? What's the difference between tyranny and rebellion? Well, rebellion is that rebellion is opposite to someone is opposed to someone who is in authority or dominion. They're opposed to it. They rebel against those people who are in some position of leadership or authority. Tyranny is cruel, unreasonable, and arbitrary use of power or control. All right, now, what's the setting here? We know that Moses and Aaron were not tyrants. They did not abuse their power. We have no evidence of them abusing. Moses didn't do everything perfectly, but he wasn't a tyrant. He didn't go against God's will. He didn't take off out on his own as some leaders may have done, may have decided to do, is I'll take over. Look at me. I've been appointed by God. I'm the great Moses, and I'm going to lead you guys out. He was a rather humble man. If you go back to kind of the beginnings, if you remember, not just when he was living in the palace, Pharaoh's palace with Pharaoh's daughter, but after he killed an Egyptian, because Egyptian was misusing an Israelite, and he took off running. He went to Midian, and he became a sheep herder. And I remember he saw the burning bush, the fire and everything, and he approached it, and it was God. And he had to take off his shoes, and he bowed to God, and God gave him instructions. This is what I want you to do. And it was like, oh no, I can't do that. I'm not a man of eloquent speech. He did not think of himself as being a leader. There was no indication of Moses believing that he was a leader. He was a rather humble individual. And so God said, well, I'm going to send Aaron along with you, and Aaron can do the speaking for you. And I'm sure Moses went, woo, that's really good, because I didn't want to be up in front of anybody speaking. So he was not the kind of guy that would grasp power, which there's tremendous lessons in all of this that we're not even going to talk about. But one of those that we're not going to talk about is the fact that God doesn't always just choose this dynamic, well-spoken, well-educated, politician-type person that says, look at me, follow me, I'll take care of you. That wasn't Moses. He was a humble man, but he did believe in God. He did believe in the Word of God and the instructions of God, and he followed them the very best that he possibly could. A good man, absolutely. So anyway, we have rebellion against perceived tyranny. Now, you can put some other words with that if you wish, but I'm using the word tyranny this evening. All right, so let's begin looking or scanning through chapter 16, and I'll read a little, I'll scan a little. Let's just check out what we can here. What do you say? All right, let's look at let's just look at the first two verses. Korah, I'm going to skip some of this, and Dathan and Abiram and On became insolent. Now I'm reading from the NIV. Became insolent. Well, that's really. I've always been kind of an NIV fan, but that's not even close to what it really says. Okay, so I don't know where they came up with this. But what it means is they took action. That became insolent is one word that literally says, and of course they would put qualifiers on words. One word that says take action, or they took action. Okay, so what it really says is these four took action and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men. Who are they? Well-known community leaders who have been appointed members of the council. So we're not talking about the dregs of Israelite society here. We're talking about leaders. These are folks who other Israelite folks have put trust in. I don't know if you want to call it the cream of the crop or not, but these are the folks that rose up in their little tribes and in their little gatherings as leaders, okay? So they had 250 of them. What a scene. Usually, Moses deals with a few individuals or whatever. Remember, he dealt with Aaron and Miriam kind of rebelled against him, and Miriam suffered because of that. But now he's dealing with 204 people all of a sudden. Look at verse 3. They came as a group. We've mentioned this before. It's almost like there's almost a pattern of rebellion that says, if I want to rebel against something, whatever it is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my friends, I'm going to go to other people and say, what do you think about this? You like Moses? You think Moses is usurping his authority? Do you think Aaron just thinks he's about it as the high priest? I think we ought to get up and go do. They try to gather people around them. Well, they did a good job because they found 250 people to go with them. So Korah and Dathan and Abiram maybe on. I think he went home. But they, as they began to approach Moses, they were, they had their fingers in their suspenders. They thought things were going their side because look at who we have with us. We have voted and we win. We have the numbers and people are upset about this, all right? So what happened? They came to Moses and Aaron and said to them, I'm in last part of verse 3, you have gone too far. The whole community is holy. Stop just a second. Let me reinterpret that my way, okay? You guys think you're the only holy people, but we're holy too. Well, of course, Moses and Aaron never gave indication that they were more holy than thou. But that's kind of the approach they took. And he says, the whole community is holy, every one of them. And the Lord is with them. So God's on our side, Moses. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? We have kind of two things going on here, and that you'll notice as we get into it. Korah they're very concerned about Moses and Aaron, but it's like two concerns in one, okay? And so it's like, you're the leader over us, and you think you're better than we are. Aaron, you're the priest over us, and you think you're holier than we are. That's kind of my interpretation of it. When Moses, verse 4, when Moses heard this, he fell face down. It's not going to be the last time. What does that indicate? What picture conjures up in your mind when you read Moses fell down on his face? He fell face down. The first thing that comes to my mind is this is not the first rebellion. Moses has had it, It's like, I can't believe this is happening again. Here they come again. Do you think Moses a lot of times felt like, gee, I'm the only one? Everybody's against me. Why doesn't anybody want to follow God as I am following God? He fell face down. And then he said to Korah and his followers, in the morning, I love this, in the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy. Now, of course, we know the word holy means set aside. So we have to be very careful when we use it because the word holy, and especially perhaps in our modern society, has come to mean whatever people want it to mean. But holy meant that it was set apart, set aside. God set aside Moses and Aaron for a particular cause. He didn't say Moses and Aaron are better. He didn't say they're more spiritual. He didn't say they're greater people than the rest of them. He just set them aside and said, this is what I want you to do. So this holiness thing is a real problem with Korah, perhaps, and the rest of them. And I don't know, Korah and the others are wanting to take leadership roles as well, no problem. And so we'll look at excuse me, I missed this part. God will, where did I leave off? In the morning, the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy. And he will have that person come near him. Moses and Aaron both come near the Lord. Remember, they go into the tent of meeting. That's where they meet with God, and he comes down in the pillar and all that kind of stuff. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. He's laying a challenge out for them. Take censers and tomorrow put burning coals and incense in them before the Lord. The man that the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far. Okay, so what's a censer? There's different terminology for censers in the Old Testament. It's often called a fire pot. Everybody in their tents had a fire pot. And they would go to a common place and get coals so that they could come back to their tent and start a fire and stay warm that evening, or cook meals or whatever they needed to do. So some religions today still use censers. You know, it's a little coal-filled and incense-filled thing with chains and stuff, and you swing it around. Okay, that's really kind of what we're talking about here, okay? And so Moses tells him, go get your censers. God's going to tell you who's holy. Not me. God's going to tell you who's holy. But look at verse 8. Moses also said to Korah, now listen, you Levites. Isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the community and brought you near to himself? Not going to read it. He's telling Korah, listen, you're already special in God's sight in a certain way because God has separated you from the other 11 tribes, and he says you're going to be the ministers, you're going to be the spiritual guiders of the community. Aren't you happy with that? What's wrong with you? And so, and jump down to verse 12. Then Moses summoned Dathan. He said that to Korah. Then he summoned Dathan and Abiram, because remember, Korah was wanting to be a high priest. He summoned Dathan and Abiram, but he said, but they said, we will not come. Moses says, you bring your fire pots, your censers, and we come to the tent of meeting, and God's going to say who's holy, blah, blah. Moses said, we're not doing that. We're not going to come. Isn't it enough that you've brought us up to the land from the land that flows with milk and honey, and you promised to take us to the land that flows with milk and honey? We're not there. Where is it? We're hanging around out here in the desert. They're pretty upset about this. Verse 15, then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged them in any way. So Moses goes back to God and says, don't accept anything they offer. Verse 16, then Moses goes back to Korah. You and all your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow. You and they and Aaron. Verse 17, each man is to take his censer and put incense in it, 250 censers in all, so the whole bunch of them, and present it before the Lord. You and Aaron are to present your censers also. So each of them took his censer, put burning coals and incense in it. That was, by the way, the censer and the burning coals was part of the worship of God. It was part of the temple. It was part of the tabernacle where they would go in and blow smoke and things like the high priest at the Ark of the Covenant once a year, and then at the table of the censers every day. In fact, the censer type ceremonies took place twice a day, one in the morning and one in the evening. So this is not uncommon for them at all. 250, you guys take all your coals and stand with Moses and Aaron at the entrance of the tent. So, verse 19, when Korah had gathered all his followers in opposition to them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. God is in on this, and he's going to take care of business, okay? Verse 20, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, separate yourself from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. Now, what does that say to you? Well, I know what it says. Verse 22, but Moses and Aaron, here we go again, fell face down and cried, oh God, the God who gives breath to all living things, will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins? Talking about Korah. Then the Lord said to Moses, I'm going to change the plan a little bit here. Say to the assembly, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now picture this. when the Israelites settled, as they moved around, when they settled in a place, put the tabernacle here, and all around on four sides were the various tribes. And they set their tents up in a orderly manner on all four sides, okay? So God says to Moses, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the assembly, move back from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything that belongs to them, or you'll be swept away because of their sin. So they moved, good for you, from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram had come out and were standing with their wives and children and little ones at the entrance of their tent. So if you can picture the tent, and here they are all lined up. They're ready to go. Moses said, this is how you'll know. We're not going with that original site because they said they weren't going to do it. So Moses said, this is how you'll know the Lord has sent me, to do all the things that was not my idea. So how many times have we seen that? This isn't my idea, this is God's idea, okay? Verse 29, if these men die a natural death and suffer the fate of all mankind, in other words, they just live a long time, then the Lord brings about something totally new. But if the Lord brings about something totally new and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them and they go down alive into the realm of the dead, then you'll know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt. So there is going to be a showdown. It wasn't the original. It's going to be the showdown now. God, it's in your hands at this point. Verse 31, as soon as he finished saying this, the ground under them split open, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households and all those associated with Korah, together with their possessions. They went down alive into the realm of the dead with everything they owned. The earth closed over them and they perished and were gone from the community. You've heard the term tit for tat. You know, you do this, I'll do that. This whole trip, God has been extremely patient with the children of Israel. But now he's upping the ante, okay? You're going to rebel against me. Watch this. You're not going to believe what happens next. And at their cries, all the Israelites around them fled. They took off running and shouting, the earth is going to swallow us too. And then fire, verse 35, came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who offered the incense. God's serious about this. God is serious about rebellion. He's serious about the rebellious heart. And I do believe, I don't get it, I don't know why, but I do believe that some people just have a rebellious heart. They're just gonna rebel against leadership, against authority, just gonna rebel against God, just gonna rebel against whatever. I don't know how it happens, I don't get it, but I believe there are people that are just bound and determined to do that. And so after Moses and Aaron set all this up, they still rebelled. Wow. Verse 33, I just read it, verse 33, and fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. What happened to the people of Israel? They were running scared for their lives. They weren't standing by their tents anymore. They were fleeing. There was no place to go, but they were fleeing, all right? Kick down to verse 41. The next day, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Are you serious? Are you serious? After all this happened, the next day, the whole Israel, not just Korah, Dathan, Abiram, On, and the 250, but the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. You have killed the Lord's people. When does it end? When does it end? Verse 42, but when the assembly gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron and turned toward the tent of meeting, suddenly the cloud covered it and the glory of the Lord appeared. When Moses and Aaron went in front of the tent of the meeting, the Lord said to Moses, get away from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. And they fell face down. Then Moses said to Aaron, take your censer and put some incense in it along with the burning coals and from the altar and hurry to the assembly. Go out to these people, hurry. The wrath of God the wrath has come from the Lord. The plague has started already. So Aaron did as Moses said, and he ran out in the midst of the assembly. He had his censer, he had his coal, he had his incense, and he was asking God to stop. And God did. He stood between Aaron. He stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. But 14,700 people died from the plague, in addition to those who died because of Korah, those 4 and the 250. Those 3 and 250. On is in the tent with his wife, perhaps. Then Aaron turned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting, for the plague had stopped. Wow. I keep thinking, is that us? Are we that kind of people? Are we the kind of people that just rebel against God? No matter what he wants, no matter what he says? Do we rebel against our leaders? Do we rebel against God? Wow. Absolutely amazing. All right, good lessons from this bad trio. Make sure your ambitions line up with God's desire for you, what they didn't do. I could take all these next slides and I can just say, don't do what Korah, Dathan, and Abiram did. Just don't do what they did. But I'm going to break it down a little bit. Make sure your ambitions line up with God's desires for you. Everybody has ambitions of some kind. Everybody has desires. Everybody wants something. Make sure it lines up with God, or it's all for naught. It's all for naught. Be satisfied with where God has placed you and do well there. Do well there. I've known a lot of people in my life that had the opportunity to go on to greater things, and they chose not to because they thought they were just doing good where they were. And our American society often says, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want promotion? Why don't you want to go to the next level? I remember when we were living in Carrizosa, New Mexico, out in the middle of nowhere. Small little congregation, 50 people, whatever. And we had one lovely lady, business owner. Our annual budget was, our weekly budget was $200, so that tells you how poor the congregation was. We had one lady that was a business owner. Probably most of that $200 came from her. She came to me one time. She said, you're doing a good job preaching. I've never done a good job preaching. But she said, you're doing a good job preaching. One of these days, you're going to want a bigger church. And, of course, I was like, what, Norma, 28, 29 years old. And then I started looking around me at our little congregation that I loved, and I thought, why would I want to leave this? I didn't have the ambition she thought I had. You know what I'm saying? But that's what people think, and that's why people push us, and that's why people do things. What you're good at, do it. If you're not good at the next level, be careful for that advancement. That could be the end of you. Be careful. And I'm talking in just worldly terms now. But think about our relationship and our work with God. Whatever you're good at, just do it. Be happy doing it. You don't always have to take things to the next level. Rebellion against God's leaders is actually rebellion against God. That was proved in Numbers 16. They never said they were rebelling against God. They said they were rebelling against Moses and Aaron. Be careful. Think about it. You may not always agree with leadership, but leadership must always be treated with respect. How about having a civil conversation rather than a rebellion? How about trying to converse with people rather than shouting insults or threats or making accusations? How about just having a civil conversation? Choose whom you will follow very carefully. Now, most of us in here, or a good majority of us in here, are older and have grown children. Did we try to teach our children, be careful who you're hanging with, you know? Choose who you follow very carefully. I remember from a little kid on, there was always somebody on the playground that was the leader. And everybody lined up behind them. And if he said, we're going to play baseball, we played baseball. If he said, we're just going to run around in circles till they call us back to class, we're just going to run around in circles till they call us back to class. Remember that? It's part of us from being small up. Be careful who you follow. Make sure it's what God wants from you. Bad company corrupts good character. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Philippians 2 and verse 3. If Paul had only gotten to the Israelites and the 204 before they started that mess, maybe he could have talked them out of it. I don't know. Francis Schaeffer said, the beginning of men's rebellion against God was and is the lack of a thankful heart. Are you thankful? Or are you discontent? All right. We've got about 6 minutes before devotional time. I have enjoyed doing these lessons. As I got to looking at them, you know, there's probably 7 or 8 million bad guys in the Bible. I don't know, maybe that many. It would have been fun to talk about all of them. But I hope you and I have learned something from this. God bless us. Oh yeah, the drama. Did I not announce that? It was right on top of my notes. Okay. Microphone. Giraffes, which is the 3rd and 4th graders. If you are a parent, grandparent, or prayer pal of a giraffe, if you have a giraffe as a child, then you need to head to the drama class at 7:45. You still have about 5 minutes.
Good to have you with us tonight. Take a songbook and turn with me to number 678. 678. We'll sing the first, third, and fourth verses. After this song, Kevin Bennett has our devotional message tonight. Number 678. More about Jesus would I know, more of his grace to others show, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus in his word, holding communion with my Lord, hearing his voice in every line, making each faithful saying mine. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus on his throne, riches in glory all his own, more of his kingdom sure increase, more of his coming Prince of Peace. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to talk a little bit about knowledge and wisdom. There's a couple of things I'd like to point out about knowledge and wisdom before we get into what we're going to talk about. You can have knowledge without wisdom, but you can't have wisdom without knowledge. So I'd like to have you think about knowledge and wisdom as we go through 1 Samuel, part of chapter 4, and a little bit of chapter 5. We're going to go through it pretty quickly because I only have 5 minutes, sorry. What you'll see is there's a lot of knowledge and not a whole lot of wisdom in this section. So, in chapter 4, the Israelites are fighting with the Philistines again. Philistines defeated Israel, killing about 4,000 men. The Israelites kind of panicked, and they sent some of the men back to bring the ark back to battle with them. Now, this wasn't done ever. At this time, they kept the ark in the most holy place of the tabernacle, and the people never saw it. The priests were the only people that saw the Ark of the Covenant. So the Israelites were trying to use the ark as the ultimate good luck charm, thinking that God would step in if they brought the ark out. The Israelites shouted so loudly that the earth shook when they saw that the ark was with them. The Philistines heard the shouting and saw that the ark was there. And in verse 8 it says, "We are doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness." I never thought about that the enemies of the Israelites knew where they came from, and they knew what God had done for them, and they were scared. But the Philistines rallied. They knew the history of the Israelites. But the Philistines rallied, and the Israelites lost 30,000 men this time. The Ark of God was captured, and Eli's 2 sons were killed. They had come along with the ark. And we're going to skip ahead to chapter 5. This is a good part. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Kind of brings the Indiana Jones-ish feel to it. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. Now, Dagon was the god of the Philistines, the national god of the Philistines. He was the fish god. He was part man and part fish. The picture that Google showed me was he looked kind of like a merman. He had a fish tail. He had a big beard, kind of an ugly guy. But the Philistines took the ark into and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. Must have been an earthquake we didn't feel overnight or something. Let's just set him back up. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face again on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. And this next part, this is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who entered Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. So instead of admitting the knowledge that they had, that the God of Israel was powerful and their God had fallen before him, they changed their religion so they wouldn't have to be reminded that their God was nothing. They changed their religion. Think of all the decisions in this story that were based on knowledge instead of wisdom. And there's a lot. There wasn't a whole lot of wisdom in this story on either side. So let's have a quick prayer and we'll close. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for all the many blessings that you've given us, and thank you for bringing us to this place and for helping us to gain knowledge and wisdom from your word. And thank you for blessing us with the people that are able to teach us, and for the gift of the Bible that you have for us. Thank you for your Son, and help us to always be mindful of him and his sacrifice. Guide us and direct us always, and keep us safe through this week. Through Jesus we pray. Amen.